You could have not just one, but 2 quilt tops done in less than a day with just one jelly roll. This pattern is beginner friendly and uses what is called a jelly roll, which is a pre-cut type of fabric that comes in 2.5-inch strips. And I got 2 36-inch square quilts out of this one jelly roll. And I even had a few strips left over. For one quilt, you'll need 18 strips, and you'll want to divide them up into 3 sets of 6. If you're making 2 quilts, you'll do that again with another 18 strips for a total of 36 strips for 2 quilts. Depending on how many pieces are in your jelly roll, you may have some leftover strips, which you could use for binding the quilt or another project. You can start sewing your sets of 6 strips together. I like to lay mine out ahead of time, and you will just sew them together by placing them right sides together and sewing 1/4 inch from the edge. You can add on 1 by 1 or do 3 sets of 2 and then put all of those sets together. That is how I did mine. You'll just want to be careful that when you are opening them up, if you're not pressing in between attaching everything, that they are opened up enough that you're not sewing anything closed, if that makes sense. So here you'll see I am chain piecing 3 sets of 2. And if this is too much, just do 1 at a time and add them all together till you have a set of 6 of these strips put together. And then here I am putting the 2 sets of 2 together by placing them right sides together and sewing along that one long end. And then finally I am adding the last set of 2 onto the 4 I just put together. You can press these as you go. I just waited till I had all 6 together to press them, and I pressed all of my seams down in one direction, but this is just my personal preference. If you want to press your seams open, go for it. I pressed all of my sets of 6 down so that I could flip them around and nest the seams as I start to put these together. So you'll want to repeat this process with all 3 sets of 6, and you will end up with 3 of these long strips. After they're pressed, we are actually going to cut them into smaller pieces. I did not mention this earlier, but I did lower my stitch length to about 2.0. You could go even lower, like 1.8, just because we are going to be trimming these, and I don't want any stitches to come undone. First, I square off the end so that is nice and square, and then I begin cutting 6.5-inch strips. These should be about 12.5 by 6.5 inches. If you are finding they're not 12.5 inches, don't worry about it too much. Just use a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance instead. You will get 6 of these 12.5 by 6.5 inch blocks and a little left over. Repeat this with the other 2 sets of 6 strips, so you should end up with 18 of these total. Now begin pairing them up and putting them in sets of 2 and sewing them together by placing them right sides together and sewing 1/4 inch from the edge. This is why I press my seams down, because then I have these cuts that I flip one the other way around and I can nest my seams. But again, pressing them open is fine too. It's really just whatever you prefer. You should have 18 of these individual rectangles that you're putting together into 9 squares total by placing 2 right sides together and sewing 1/4 inch from the edge, like I said. Here's kind of a close-up of how I like to nest the seams and sew along the edge. And this is what those squares should look like, and you should end up with 9 of these total for each quilt you're making. I then pressed it, and once you repeat this with all 18 pieces and you have those 9 squares, we'll put them in a 3x3 layout. I just do this on the floor. If you have a design wall, that works too. You'll see that the strips are going in alternating directions here. Top row is like horizontal, vertical, then horizontal again, and then the next row is the opposite and the last row is the same. And then we just put these blocks together. You could do rows first and then put all the rows together by placing them right sides together, sewing 1/4 inch from the edge. You will find that the 3rd strip in, that seam you can match up with the middle seam of the block next to it, if that makes sense. I like to match up that seam first and then work my way up to kind of figure out where I begin sewing if my blocks are a little uneven. And what I did is I put my 3 rows together and then put those rows together to make the final quilt top, and then I did it all over again with another set of 18 strips. This only took me a couple hours. If you need a quick project to throw together, this one's for you. I've been dying to get another quilt on my long arm, so I wanted something quick and easy, and this was perfect for that.